My name is Gladys. I am 74 years old and have lived almost my entire life in a white wooden house with a balcony and the smell of fresh coffee in the morning. It is in West Ashley. Wow. An old and quiet neighborhood of Charleston. My late husband and I built that house with our own hands, brick by brick, dream by dream. After he left, it was there that I lived my days with faith, peace, and memories, until the day I got sick. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens to a woman alone when she suddenly gets sick? When I fainted in the supermarket and woke up in a hospital, I didn't imagine that this hospitalization would lead me not only to lose my health, but also my home, my dignity, and, what hurt me the most, my trust in my own son. No, if you've come this far, thinking you've seen it all, I invite you to stay with me, because what happened to me may be happening to a lot of people out there. In silence, by the end of this story, you will understand how a son can transform his own mother's house into an exchange asset without her knowing. Oh, and what does a woman betrayed by blood do when all she has left? It is silence. What and what are the young? But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. When I returned from the hospital, after 30 days in the hospital, with a weak body and a tired soul, I found that my key no longer opened the door of my own house. The lock had been changed, and the one who opened the door was a strange woman with a baby in her arms, saying, "How? You must be mistaken. Wrong." That was the word she used, and that still echoes within me today. My son didn't answer. My house was no longer mine. And the world suddenly became cold, even with the sun hitting the asphalt hard. If you're here and got to this video because of that phrase or that feeling that doesn't come out of your chest, stay with me. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and walk by my side. Because this is not just my story. It belongs to all of us who have been forgotten by those who swore to take care of us. Sometimes, all we need is to know that we are not alone, to have the courage to tell the whole truth. And today, I'll tell you, at that time, my life was made up of small rituals. I would wake up early, brew my black coffee, very strong, as Henry liked it, and sit on the porch with the radio on quietly, just to listen to the news and feel the morning breeze pass through the plants I cared for myself. It wasn't a life full of luxury, but it was my life. It was the house that my husband and I built together. Each wall had a story. The room still kept his scent on the pillow, even 12 years after he left. And in the kitchen, I still had the apron that he always said made me look like a little girl coming out of the oven with the bread. In the afternoon, I knitted, not out of necessity, but out of taste. I made a cardigan for my grandchildren even before they were born. And when he didn't have the needles in his hands, he was whipping up something Brandon liked: peach cobbler, fried chicken, cornbread. I was the mother of one, but I was able to love as if I had a dozen. Brandon has always been my world, and I went to the ground for him to walk. I paid for his studies at Columbia with a lot of effort. I went back to work as a night nurse for a while, just to make sure he didn't get into debt. When he married Melanie, a beautiful girl, but always watching everything, I helped at the entrance to the house myself. And then, when the grandchildren were born, I was the one who bought the crib, the first shoes, and even the carpet in the living room where they took their first steps. Melanie was never one to hug, always polite, but cold. He treated me with a protocol respect, like someone who talks to a visitor who takes too long to leave. But I always held back. I never made a fuss. Well, I would rather keep the peace than be right. I told myself that over time, she would see me with different eyes. After all, that's what family is all about. A little patience, a little prayer. The house where I lived alone was my shelter. The only good in my name. After a lifetime of donating the rest to those in need. But it wasn't her value that mattered to me. It was the sound of wood when I stepped into the hallway, the smell of soap in the bathroom, the gate that made that annoying creak that I never wanted to fix because it reminded me of our youth. That house was my soul in wood and peeling paint. Brandon called from time to time. Sometimes I let the boys talk to me by video. Melanie appeared behind with that hurried expression, as if each call was a favor granted. I still smiled. I still smiled. He said everything was fine. He lied so as not to worry. Or maybe he lied so as not to hurt me anymore. It was in those moments that I held on to the small joys. Watching the grandchildren grow up, hearing my son's voice saying, "Hi, Mom," even if it was only once a week. I was enough of that. It didn't need much. But do you know what I learned later? That sometimes we settle for crumbs because we have forgotten the taste of the banquet we once served. What a woman who gives too much ends up thinking that he deserves less. And here I wanted to take a break, because if you, who are listening to this story, have ever felt this feeling of having done everything, given everything, and yet being treated as if it were a burden, comment below with a phrase that comes from the heart. It can be a "I've lived it," or a simple "it touched me." Sometimes, just knowing that there are people feeling like us already helps to relieve a little of this quiet pain that lives in the chest. At the time, I still didn't know what lay ahead. I believed that silence was just the rush of life, that the absence was just a phase. But the truth, it's just that their silence was already the rehearsal of my exclusion. And I, silly that I was, still believed that a son's love was eternal. But nothing prepared me for what was to come, because everything started to change with one sentence. A phrase said by Melanie at a Sunday lunch, a phrase that, on that day, seemed innocent to me. But today, I understand that it was the first nail in the door that she herself would help to close. Can you guess what it was that she said? Because it is from there that everything started to fall apart. In the months leading up to my fall, something inside me was already a little restless, but I couldn't name it. Brandon started calling less. And when I called you, everything was fast, automatic, like someone who wants to cross an appointment off the list. Hi, Mom. Is everything okay? That's good. I'm running here. Set harm. Then I'll call you calmly. But this calmly never came. Those calls that used to come with laughter from the boys in the background started to be just silence and low voices. There was a day when I called, and the one who answered was Melanie. He said that Brandon was busy, and then he would return. He did not return. I thought it was just work, tiredness, adult things with family. I've always given a lot of space. I've never been one of those mothers who suffocate. I have always believed that a well-raised child comes back, even if it's just to say I'm here. No, one defies not caught. But it wasn't just tiredness. The distance had another smell. It tasted like something hidden. I began to notice that Melanie spoke for him more and more. I think it's better not to go this weekend. The boys are sick. Brandon is exhausted. I didn't you out there. He preferred to sleep a little, and I accepted. Smile. What's doing it hard? I kept quiet, because I have always preferred harmony to confrontation. But my heart already felt it. Mother feels. But love is a blindfold that we ourselves tie to our own eyes. Easter lunch was the first nuisance that screamed inside. They came. Oh, the four of them, as they always did. And now they brought the wine. Why? The cake, the children's eggs, everything seemed normal. But I noticed how Brandon barely looked me in the eye. How Melanie spent the whole time on her feet, tidying up, cleaning. When now, an occurred, Chezikakawa, onto that ordined filter, pretending to be active. As if it wasn't a celebration, but a chore. And then there was a moment that I can't remember. We were all seated. And so crowded in his round. I got up to get the pudding. And when I came back, I saw Melanie in the corner of the room, looking very carefully at the top of the closet, where I kept a red folder. That folder was old, threadbare, but it contained all the important documents. Deed to the house, my simple will, paid bills, insurance papers. When our eyes met, she immediately deviated, and that's when I asked, "Is everything okay?" "Oh, Melanie?" She smiled. No, that smile that doesn't heat up. On, and said, yes, but perhaps you should start thinking of something smaller, more practical. Near us, this house is big for one person. Right. I stood still. I looked at her like someone who gets slapped. I didn't expect. I didn't answer. Why didn't answer? I just lowered my eyes and came back with the pudding. It was as if she had opened a curtain, and I suddenly saw that this forced affection was hiding something else. No one suggests that you abandon your home without having already planned it beforehand. In the following days, I kept remembering this scene as someone who chews something bitter. I began to notice that Brandon no longer appeared alone. He never visited me again. Just him and the boys. Always with Melanie. As if it were a filter. A wall. And that worried me. But I didn't want to see evil. Not at that point in life. Not from the one I saw born. Even so, the silence between us increased. His answers became shorter. No, I am busy. I'll call you later. And sometimes, not even that. I tried to ignore it. I was distracted by my plants, by crocheting, no, until piano got down, by the radio. But it is difficult to silence the heart, because he screams silently. And I was already screaming loudly. No, but I still thought it was my exaggeration. That it was a thing of age, too much sensitivity, until one day, while cleaning the drawers, I found something that made me stop. Wow. An open envelope with a copy of an old power of attorney that I signed a couple of years ago. At the time, I had a brief hospitalization. At the time, Brandon said it was just to facilitate payments in case I needed it. And I, one, trusting, signed, Bill Wondyard. Signed, I haven't read everything. Trusted. He was my son, my only son. I was holding that paper for minutes. I felt a shiver, the same kind of shiver that we feel before a storm. I didn't know yet what was coming, but there I knew that something inside my life had started to slip without me realizing it. And now I ask you, when did my son stop being mine? Because I didn't know it yet, but that paper, that look at Melanie, that phrase at lunch, all this was just the beginning. The storm was still brewing, and when it came, it dragged more than the shingles on my roof, dragged my name from the front door, and it took away everything I believed to be safe. But how did this castle of memories become a minefield? What else did that paper hide? And because, deep down, I already felt that that house was no longer just mine, even before they opened the door and said to me, "Are you wrong?" I never liked going to the market alone, but that morning I needed rice and blood pressure medicine. It was a sultry Monday, one of those in which the sky seems to weigh on people's heads. I remember pushing the cart slowly, trying to focus on the mental list ID, repeated in my head so many times. But it was when I got close to the cashier that everything started to spin. A dry dizziness, the cold sweat running down his back, and the light, it slowly disappeared. I woke up on the floor, with a man holding my hand and a girl calling my name loudly. The rest is a blur. I was taken straight to the Musk Hospital, right here in Charleston. They said that my blood pressure had skyrocketed, and that maybe it was a mini-stroke. I was hospitalized. First, just in case. Then, through the exams. Then, because they began to discover other things. Diabetes, liver, complications, the fatigue of a body that carried a lot of weight for a long time. The days turned into weeks, and the faces, always the same. Doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, and me, alone, with that cold gown, lying on a bed, too white for those who always had color at home. Brandon appeared twice. The first, on the second day, when they were still stuffing me with needles and serum, he entered with a worried face, but without a hug. She said, "Oh, don't worry. Oh, Mom, Mom, everything is under control." Oh, was because I wanted to believe. He stayed only 20 minutes. He said that the work was hard, that the children were allergic, and that anything was just to send a message. The second visit was on the 8th day, even shorter. This time, oh girl, he didn't bring me flowers. It brought silence. I asked for the boys. He said they were fine. I asked for Melanie. He said he was tired. Next, after that, disappeared. No, Melanie didn't show up. Not once. Not a single call. Not a message. The nurses, well, always kind, began to ask, "Don't you have children around here?" And I smiled, as I learned to smile even when I was bleeding inside. And I said, "Nikaya, you are ditchiwa. Are they not sister? They're not shy out." "Yes, I do. They must be busy." But deep down, that question cut me like a dull knife, because no, between exams, therapies, and sleepless nights because of back pain, I began to feel that my presence in the world no longer weighed on anyone. Weigh, as if I had become too light to be remembered. However, there was a night when it rained heavily. The hospital was colder than usual. I asked for an extra blanket. As I waited, I looked out the window and saw the drips slide like tears. And I thought, now we sealed Carol Arnold shut down. Does anyone know that I am still here? Because there is a type of pain that does not make noise. It is the silence of knowing that, even if you are alive, you have already been removed from the priorities of those you once carried in your arms. I tried to distract myself. I made friends with a nurse named Lisa. Good girl. Patient. I love Onokawis. Always with sweet words. She brought me books from the children's ward because she said they were lighter for those who needed to dream a little. And I read it. I read it as if grabbing what remains. I wrote loose phrases in a sketchbook, remembered recipes, scribbled prayers. I refused to collapse, because I learned that a woman who has lived a long time does not fall all at once. She cracks inside until she becomes a firm stone. On the 15th day, my doctor told me that I was reacting well, but I would need to stay a while longer. I said that my blood pressure fluctuated a lot, and diabetes needed to be controlled. He asked if anyone would come to accompany me to the appointments. I lied. I said yes, but I knew it wasn't. I started talking to the hospital's social worker. She was kind, offered me options for after discharge. Temporary home? No. Transportation assistance. Medicines? No. I heard everything. I kept each paper. Well, but inside, it hurt me to imagine going home alone, to come back without a hug, without hot soup waiting on the stove, without anyone to say, "Don't worry, Mom, in here." How? But what I didn't imagine, was that the worst was yet to come. Because when, finally, I received the news that I would be discharged, my heart was filled with hope. I thought about breakfast on the balcony, on the living room carpet, in the smell of my house. I thought the pain was gone. I thought I was going to go back to my place in the world. But the world, nay, I no longer kept any place. And now I ask you, how do we prepare to discover that what was ours was taken while we were fighting to stay alive? Because what was waiting for me outside that hospital, it was crueler than any diagnosis. On the day I was discharged, I remember putting on lipstick for the first time in weeks, a faded pink, almost colorless, but it was enough to make me feel like a person again. The nurse helped me put on the clothes I had put away in the hospital drawer, my blue linen pants and a white cotton blouse with lace on the collar. I folded the discharge papers, took my bag with the medicines, and waited for the social transport car that would take me home. My house, just thinking about it, my heart felt like it was warming inside. I dreamed of that balcony, of my old radio, of the smell of soap in the sink. I thought going back there would cure me of the rest. The car drove through the streets of Charleston, and my chest tightened as I recognized the corners. I passed by the bakery where I bought bread on Saturdays, by the bus stop where Henry was waiting for me with the newspaper under his arm, through the red brick wall of the boys' school, down, until, finally, hell, we turned on my street, and it was there that something seemed wrong to me. The silver car in the garage wasn't mine. The tire overhang on the oak tree in front never existed. And the curtains were burgundy voile. I've never had a curtain of that color. I got out of the car slowly with the help of the driver. His hands trembled, his body still tired, but his soul in a hurry. I went to the gate, my gate, but it was painted another color, moss green. Mine was peeled white. I put the key in the lock, and once, the same one I used for more than 30 years. She didn't get in. Forced. Turned. Now. Nothing. The driver looked at me, not knowing what to do. I rang the bell. Did a sound. Would no gentleman city that. You know what thinking at that. Once. Twice. Silence. In the third, a woman appeared. Young man. Oh, well. I didn't hear that. Let's see what's that time. With a baby in his arms and a frightened expression, he opened only half of the door. She looked at me as if looking at a stranger. Are you looking for someone? My voice almost didn't come out. This is my home. She hesitated, looked at the baby, and replied, you. Sorry, this house belongs to my mother-in-law. Her son passed it on to us. You must be wrong. Wrong. That word pierced me like a cold wind. I took a step back. I looked at the facade. No, I looked at the facade. I looked for some trace of myself there. No. The wind chime I hung. The vases on the porch. No. Melanie's fern. No. Everything was gone. That house, it was no longer mine. The baby cried, Brandon attacked and the old septard. The Zune. Sois. The woman closed the door. Now, I didn't see him. I stayed there, standing, one Arius town, with the key in his hand and his heart on the ground. I tried to call Brandon. Once, two, three. No. Mailbox. I texted, Where's Brandon? What's going on? No response. The transport driver asked if he wanted him to wait. I nodded. But inside I collapsed. I sat on the step of the sidewalk. My legs weakened. The sun was beating down on his face. Me, Fallon, with the medicine bag on my lap and the lost look. I thought that maybe I had dreamed of that house. That maybe I was really wrong. But no, I knew every inch of that floor. Am here opening my heart. Telling my story. If you're listening, me, Kyle Wow. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. Because what I experienced that day was not just a betrayal. It was an erasure. As if, all of a sudden, I had ceased to exist. And no one warned me. Minutes later, the driver suggested that we return to the hospital. There, I spoke with the social worker. She took me to a room, offered me water, and said, let's solve this calmly. Mrs. Gladys. But what she didn't know, and neither did I know yet, was that it wasn't a mistake. It was not a confusion of address. It was a plan, and it had already started well, before my fall at the supermarket. But what had Brandon done? How was that woman inside my house? And, above all, by what right did my own son pass my house to someone else without saying a word to me? I returned to the hospital with teary eyes, and my body weighing more than at the entrance to admission. It wasn't physical pain. It was the kind of pain that doesn't show up in any exam, but that breaks the soul inside. I sat in the social worker's office as if clinging to the last hope that it was all just a mistake. I explained what had happened, what I heard from the woman at the door, how the key didn't go in, how my son didn't answer. My. She looked at me carefully, no, unhurriedly. When would sit down, won't die. He picked up the phone and dialed the number I left. Brandon's number. He called once, two, three. No, Leonidas, I'm tired, and so was the reception. And suddenly he answered, and I'll what is a town? She said, Lyle, town. Hello, this is from the social care sector of Musk Health. Mrs. Gladys is here with us, and then silence. Then she blurted out, with the phone still in her ear. He said he can't talk now. And he hung up. I kept looking at her, as if I had heard it wrong. Did you hang up? I asked, almost voiceless. She confirmed with a slow nod. And I lowered my eyes. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat, more bitter than any medicine I took in that hospital. In the following days, I still tried. No, I called again. I sent messages. Brandon, please call me. I'm worried. I'm worried. I just want to understand what's going on. Son, tell me where you are. Nothing. Until, 3 days later, the cell phone vibrated with a notification. It was his. A single text. Cold. Dry. Surgical. Then we'll talk. I did what was best. I did what was best. I read that about 6 times, as if trying to decipher a foreign language. Better for whom? For me. It would have been better to have picked me up at the hospital, given me a hug, looked me in the eyes, and told the truth. It would have been better to have protected myself, not discarded myself. But no, Brandon chose silence, and with it came the confirmation I feared so much. It was not a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was a choice, planning, decision. How? It was at that moment that I understood. With my soul, I was alone. Literally, one you, homeless, alone, no response, no family. How? And the worst, one, betrayed not by a stranger, but by her own blood. The one I cradled in my lap, that I defended at school, that I fed with the leftovers from my plate on difficult days, the one I fought for more than for myself. In the hospital corridor, I sat on a cold bench and let my body sink. A nurse passed by and asked, "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Gladys. And I, in a low voice, said, yes, dear. I'm just waiting for time to pass, because time was all I had at that moment. But what I didn't know is that it would also bring an answer. And when it came in writing, on the code on such in black ink, blue stamp, blue, and a signature that hurt more than any words Brandon could have said. But do you know what paper is capable of taking everything away from a person, even when they are still alive? I found out, and I'll show you. I sat on a bench in Marion Square, right there, near the fountain. The sky was clear, and the palm trees danced with the wind as if there was no pain in the world. I looked around, saw families walking, laughter of children running across the lawn, and felt such an emptiness that it seemed as if my body was just skin around a memory. Life went on, as if mine hadn't just collapsed. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the wind hit my face. And it was there, on that icy stone bench, that I began to remember. Remembering everything I gave, of everything I was, of everything I built with my hands and chest. Brandon came too soon. I had a difficult pregnancy, full of fear, premature birth, and the sore birth, 7 months, incubator, now, I spent nights sitting next to that glass, with my forehead against it, praying for it to breathe, for it to live. And he lived. It grew strong. He was skinny, but smart. I said that he had the eyes of promise, and that's what he was to me, a promise of a better future. I worked as a nurse for 32 years. The first 15 were the toughest. Night shifts at St. Francis, then straight home to prepare his coffee, take him to school, sleep 2 hours, and go back to the hospital. Sometimes he dozed off on the bus. Sometimes not even that. Oh, the other mothers in the daycare center had a car. I walked on foot, but I did it with gusto, because Brandon was my everything. I had no more children. No, I had him, and I gave everything I had. And what I didn't even know I had. His birthdays. When the knee was lacking, I made it with supermarket balloons, cashier cake, and 3 friends from the street. He never called. No, he found everything funny. On the day he turned 10, it rained so much that no one showed up. I'd hide in the bathroom, silently. Whoa, and his out. But he hugged me and said, "It's okay, Mom, Mom. It's just the 2 of us." That gave me strength for another decade. When it passed Columbia, I trembled with fear because I didn't know how I was going to pay. But I found my way. I did extra taking care of an elderly woman at night. Sold my engagement ring. Well, saved on everything. When he graduated, Mike won. I cried as if I were watching a miracle happen. He thanked me. No, he cried with me. You know, I had to wish. Said, "Wow, you did it, though, Mom." And I smiled, because that was enough. When she met Melanie, I made an effort, and I found her very safe, very practical, not very affectionate. But it was his choice. I offered to help at the entrance to the house. I gave part of Henry's inheritance. I bought the used car that she drives today. I paid for the renovation of the bathroom she uses every day. All in silence. I never asked for anything. I just wanted respect. And, who knows, a place at the table, even if it was in the corner. It's hard to say this now. Well, what to come. But everything I have has been put in his hands, not because of stupidity, but for love. Blind, stubborn, trusting love. And that part of the story, no one sees. Because those who look from the outside only see the old woman sitting on a bench with a lost look. He does not see the sleepless nights, the desperate prayers, the fatigue of those who gave themselves entirely. And look, if you're still here, listening to me, stay with me until the end, because what I'm still going to tell, it's not just about betrayal. It's about strength. No, it's about what happens when the one who has been forgotten raises their heads and decides not to disappear. Because the worst pain is not that of losing the house. It's to realize that someone looked at everything you were and thought it was worth nothing. On that bench, with the wind ruffling my thin hair and my eyes lost between the present and the past, I made a promise to myself. I would understand everything. I was going to find out how he did it. And, mainly, why'd say why? Because every betrayal has an origin. And when I found the paper with the signature, the truth began to reveal itself. But what that document said, it gave me goosebumps to the bone. It was on a cloudy Tuesday that I decided to go to the county clerk's office. He hadn't slept well for days. The question hammered non-stop. How could anyone be living in my house? And me being on the street? I needed to understand with my own eyes. I needed to see on paper what my soul already knew. But I still didn't want to accept it. I took an early bus, sat by the window, hugged my bag as if protecting what was left. I went quietly to the city center, with my heart wrapped up like a letter without a sender. When I got there, the building was big, cold, full of folders and silence. I went straight to the registration desk and explained that I wanted to know the situation of the house at such and such an address, on such and such street, in West Ashley. No, the girl, a young woman with glasses named Denise, looked at me with some strangeness, but was polite. He asked for my documents, typed some things into the system, and then paused. She read the screen. He pursed his lips, and he called me to a side room. There, and we sat face to face. She said, Are you sure that this house was in your name? I replied, in a trembling voice, It was built by me and my husband. The deed has been in my name for decades. Or was. Denise sighed and picked up a brown paper envelope from inside. Loan that I considered compound. He took a copy of the deed. There's some they're not organized. Emblazoned in firm letters was the name owner, Mr. Calculator, of the new owner, Melanie H. Granger, my daughter-in-law, and Septine, and the date of registration, 2 days before my hospital discharge. 2 days while I was doing physiotherapy to relearn how to walk without tripping. They transferred my house, I asked to see how this had been done. No. Denise leafed through some more papers and showed me a document with an official stamp, state letterhead, and my signature. It was a power of attorney, recorded 2 years earlier, precisely at the time I had that brief hospitalization, and Brandon showed up with a paper saying that it was just to pay bills in my name, in case I needed it. I signed it. Now, I haven't read everything. Trust it. And now, there it was. With that power of attorney, he had full power to transfer the property, which he did with surgical precision. I ran out of air. Interest. I spent a few seconds unable to breathe properly. Denise offered me water. I drank like someone swallowing a knot. My eyes blurred. But I didn't cry there. It was as if the body had frozen before the tear fell. I said, almost in a whisper, He did this to me. And she just lowered her eyes. There was nothing to say. It hurt in a way that I can't explain. Because abandonment, absence, silence is one thing. Another is the signature, the stamp, the legality of betrayal. What? It wasn't just a mistake. It was a plan. Brandon used my own confidence as a tool. It made me sign my own exclusion, and he gave everything to Melanie, as if I had never existed. It was at that moment that I stopped and thought, how many other mothers, how many other women don't sign papers thinking it's love and end up signing their own end? If you've ever felt that feeling of having been left behind by someone you trusted, comment below with something that comes from your chest. I know how it is. I understand you. Or just it's true already makes me feel less alone in this story. I took the copy of the deed, folded it carefully, and kept it inside the bag. I thanked Denise with a thread of voice. I walked out of that building as if stepping on invisible shards. The sidewalk seemed harder, the sky lower. But something in me began to change at that moment, because now I knew. It was no longer a doubt. It was not a supposition. It was a fact. The woman at the door of my house was not lying. She was occupying what, legally, was no longer mine. Aye. But what Brandon didn't know, it's just that a wounded mother also has strength, and it has memory. And what I discovered when I went after the bank, behind the account where the sale was deposited, made me understand the size of the cowardice. But it also gave me an idea, because what he thought he was going to hide, that one, ended up giving me the key to a new beginning. And can you imagine what I found? Because what's next changes everything. The room was small and almost square, with a narrow bed, a metal closet, and a window that faced a high wall. Inside, time seemed to stand still. The clock on the wall was ticking, but it didn't say anything. I sat on the edge of the bed and stayed like that for hours, not talking, not thinking, just feeling the weight of my body on the mattress. The shelter for the elderly received me with care, but without warmth. Everything was very clean, very correct, very empty. The kind of place made to welcome what is left, not what still dreams. The girl who took me there, an assistant named Teresa, was sweet. He explained to me the times of the shower, the coffee, the medication. Wow. He showed me where the cafeteria, the reading room, and so pie, kinds. The courtyard were. I smiled, thanked him. But inside, it was as if they had sewn me up inside with too thick thread. It didn't hurt. I just pulled, and their eyes burned from trying so hard to contain what they no longer wanted to fit. On the first night, the coffee was weak and lukewarm. I took it in silence, with the mug in my trembling hands. All around, other faces like mine, some with lost looks, others still wanting to tell stories that no one else wanted to hear. But I I didn't want to say anything. I just stared. Why? He looked at the bottom of the mug, as if looking for the past at the bottom of the well. I went back to my room. I took off my shoes. Through. I stared at the white ceiling, counting the infiltration stains as if counting the days he spent believing a lie. Why? I thought about my furniture, in the armchair where I sat to crochet, on the old radio, in the kitchen, in Henry's portrait in the hallway. Everything should still be there. Everything is now in the hands of those who have never washed a dish in that sink, who has never clothed that floor, who has never glued a broken cup with love. My house now had another smell, another voice, another name in the mailbox. And me, I had nothing left, nor address, nor family, but time, nor explanation. Only the dry pain of those who were torn from the very history of those who wrote it themselves. It's a strange thing. You know? You spend your whole life thinking that if you do everything right, love yourself hard, forgive yourself quickly, shut up at the right times, love will last. But it doesn't last. Sometimes love can't take the weight of ambition, or contempt, or convenience. Sometimes love becomes a thing of the past. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't make a scandal. I didn't scream. I just stayed. Whole, but empty. Yeah, because I learned that there is a kind of desperation that doesn't make noise. It is what lives in the depths of silence. And there, lying on that shallow mattress, I knew this despair. It covered me like an icy sheet, but it was so there, in the middle of that nothingness, that something began to move. I don't know if it was anger, it was pride, or just the instinct of those who have survived a lot and do not accept to end up like this. But something in me woke up, a quiet force, almost imperceptible, like a thread of light entering through a tiny crack. I didn't recognize it yet, but she was already there, waiting for the right moment to grow. And maybe, just maybe, Brandon has forgotten one thing. Mother, who survived everything in this life, it doesn't disappear easily. And what he thought he was going to bury, I was just sleeping. Because what started to sprout inside me that night, it would turn into the answer he never expected. But as someone without a home, without a name, and without support, can you turn the tide? That's when something unexpected happened. An encounter, coincidence, or would it be fate? The next morning, I woke up without knowing why. It wasn't the shelter's alarm clock. It wasn't the smell of the weak coffee or the rattling of the wheels of the chairs in the hallway. It was something in here. A small nuisance, as if the soul had chased away sleep. I put on my light blue blouse, the one that still smelled of lavender, and put on my lace-up shoes. Even though my hands trembled a little more than usual, I took bus number 7, which passed in front of the shelter, and got off at the Calhoun Street stop, right in front of the Charleston Public Library. It had been more than 20 years since I had set foot there. The last time was with Brandon for a school project on American presidents. He didn't have the patience to read, but he loved it when I read it out loud. You should record a book on tape, Mom, he would say. Ah, and I laugh, and I read another chapter. Note, was you chase, and I. But now, oh, there, Atlantinums. When he didn't say us to work hard, Apollo and she said, Toxter, alone. I asked for help from a girl named Claire, who showed me how to use one of the public computers. He gave me headphones, a temporary login, and said, if you need help, here, Hadsigia. I thanked him, and I stayed. I typed slowly. Oh, legal rights, elderly power of attorney. I hit enter. A flood of texts, videos, news, articles came. I was clicking on one by one. I read about something called asset fraud by breach of trust. And there, on that cold screen, my case was whole, as if it had been written for me. Whoa. I saw that I was not the only one. I saw that there were laws. I saw that there were women like me who trusted a son, a grandson, a son-in-law. And once did what here, and they were deleted. Silenced. Deleted with a simple signature. I read for hours. I wrote terms in a notebook. Revocation of power of attorney. Denunciation of fiduciary abuse. Sale of property without consent. It was like learning a new language, the language of survival. Every line I read, it was a brick coming back into place. Not from the house, but from myself, because, for the first time, I wasn't seeking forgiveness. I was seeking understanding. Well, he didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, and, if possible, now, justice. On the way back to the shelter, down. I looked at the sky and felt that something had changed. It was subtle, but it was real. The pain was still there, but now it went hand in hand with a strength I didn't know I still had. And I found myself thinking out loud. There at the bus stop, we die when we give up understanding what they did to us. And I decided not to die alive. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because telling this story is the way I found to transform pain into a path, to make sure that no other silent woman goes through this alone. Arriving at the shelter, I looked for the social worker. I showed the papers. I told him what I discovered. She was surprised by my initiative, but did not doubt it. He said that I could schedule an appointment with a volunteer lawyer who came on Wednesdays. I said yes, that he wanted to talk, that I didn't want to pretend it didn't hurt anymore, and that, this time, I was not going to be silent. And it was on that same day that I received a letter. No sender. No name. just a simple beige envelope left in my drawer. When I opened, my heart stopped, because its content showed that Brandon had done more than I imagined. And that, you, perhaps, he was preparing to disappear for good. But why would someone who has so much to hide leave a trace? Or is it, wasn't he the one who had sent that letter? Huh. On Wednesday, I put on my best coat, the gray wool one I bought at a sale years ago, and went to the Mount Pleasant Community Center. Wow. The place was on a quiet street, surrounded by trees, with a light blue sign at the entrance. I was nervous, not of fear, but of memory. It was as if each step to that door carried the weight of everything that was taken from me. I went in and waited sitting on a plastic chair, holding my leather bag in my lap, as if it were a shield. My name was called. Mrs. Gladys. I stood up firmly. I was greeted by Karen Myers, a woman with her hair tied in a low bun, dark-framed glasses, and steady eyes, but with a sweetness that she didn't pretend. He took me to his office, asked me to sit down, and said, "Lynn, hi. You can tell me calmly. Lions went a crowd. I counted. From fainting in the supermarket to the key that no longer turned. I spoke of the woman at the door. Now, I spoke of my son's silence. I spoke of the power of attorney that became a sentence. I showed the papers. She listened to everything in silence, without interrupting. When I finished, she lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "No, Pond, this is not only immoral, Gladys, this is illegal." Hearing that phrase, like that, gave me a kind of relief that I can't explain, because for weeks I wondered if I had overreacted, if I was getting confused, if I deserved it. But no, she confirmed it firmly. What they did to me had a name. And it led to jail. Karen explained to me that, yes, it would be difficult to reverse the time that has passed, the type of document, the signature notarized. But there was a loophole, the so-called defect of consent. If we could prove that I signed the power of attorney without fully understanding the powers it gave Brandon, and if there were indications that he acted in bad faith, we could file a motion to annul the transfer. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. She asked if I was willing to fight for the house. I looked at her with steady eyes and replied, "No, I don't want my house back. I want my dignity registered." Karen smiled. Oh, for the first time, someone understood. You. I wasn't there for bricks, for roofs, for furniture. I was there for myself, for the woman who worked 30 years without missing a day, for the mother who cried in secret so as not to worry her son, for the widow who held the world on her back and never asked for anything in return. I wanted my name cleared. My name cleared before my own conscience. Karen made some copies, asked me to sign a representation term, and said she was going to start the investigation. He also said that, for that, did I set up he needed all possible details, dates, witnesses, messages. No, I promised that I would collaborate with everything. And inside, a spark ignited. No, because sometimes all we need is someone who says, let's go together. Wow. Look, if you've come this far with me, let me tell you something. Sometimes justice does not come as we expect. She does not arrive with shouts, nor with applause. Sometimes it comes in silence, like an elderly woman walking to a community center with an envelope of papers in her hands. And if you think the strongest part of this story has passed, stay with me, because what comes after this meeting with Karen, it was a truth hidden inside an email, which no one thought I would have the courage to open. But I opened it, and he said more than I was prepared to read. 2 weeks after our conversation, Karen called me in a more tense voice than usual. She asked me to go to her office in the late afternoon, as she had important discoveries. I went with a quiet heart, but a stomach turned. I felt that something big was coming, but I didn't imagine the size. She received me with a serious look, and before she even sat down, she offered me a glass of water. I thanked him, but I didn't even touch it. I wanted to hear everything at once. Karen took a deep breath and said, Gladys, do you remember when you were first hospitalized in 2022? A lung infection? I nodded. On that occasion, Brandon showed up with a power of attorney that you signed. He said it was just to solve things at the bank and pay medical bills. This is the same power of attorney that he used to transfer the house to him. I already knew this, but the new part came soon after. The document was written by a lawyer hired by Melanie, and the mailing address on the record is their home, not yours. In other words, the power of attorney was planned, drawn up, and registered as part of something bigger. Melanie not only knew, she articulated everything. I was silent. I felt my feet tingling, as if the ground was moving away from me. Karen didn't stop there. And there's more. We surveyed Brandon's banking history in the weeks leading up to the sale of his home. He made 3 large deposits totaling over $120,000, all in the joint account with Melanie. And Feli, now, he took out life insurance in his name, with him as the sole beneficiary. 2 weeks before his most recent hospitalization, she looked me in the eyes. You understand what that means, don't you? My throat locked. That was more than coldness. It was calculation. It was premeditation. It was cruelty with signature and date. All the while, Melanie was backstage, pulling the strings with elegance and coolness. She knew my fragility. I knew the confidence I had in Brandon, and he used every bit of it to his advantage. Brandon, my boy, he became an accomplice in a plan to gently erase me, to get away from my home, my history, and who knows, my own life. I remember looking out over the corner of the room, and for a second, I saw an old scene in my head. Melanie and Brandon at Thanksgiving lunch, her smiling with her grandchildren on her lap, and me serving mashed potatoes with that apron embroidered with my name on it. I was proud to receive them, proud to have formed a family. Leonisichaparis, even with her silences, even with the distance from him. And now, all that had been just essay, part of a theater. You know, there are memories that never leave us, not with time, not with medicine, not with prayer, nay. And there are moments that become a photograph inside the chest. That fake smile of hers. Now, I saw it differently. It was the smile of someone who already knew he was going to take everything away from me. And yet, he asked for dessert politely. If you're listening to me now, pause. Try to remember a moment that makes more sense today than it did at the time. Some conversation, a look, an attitude that seemed small. Yeah, why aren't I no cotton? But then, did you understand the size? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, sharing a memory helps to give a name to what we feel. He writes, I've been through this. Or just, I understand you. Because, really, this story is not just mine. It's ours. Karen held my hand as she saw me collapse in silence. And he told me, now, Freyan, they counted on your silence. But now you have a voice, and we're going to use all of that. Fairly, legally, and firmly. They will not get away with it. And it was there that I felt that the tables had turned, because, for the first time, who deceived me? I would have to look at myself as someone who came back. But, before proceeding with the lawsuit, Karen asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you want to call him to talk? I didn't know what to say. But that night, as I lay in my simple room, £1, I heard a voice from the past again. It's okay, Mom. It's just the two of us. And that's when I decided Brandon was going to listen to me. And it was going to be face to face. But what he said when he saw me, he took me apart. And it wasn't regret. It was something else. One thing he'll never forget. Dinner was scheduled for a Thursday evening in the back hall of St. John's Church, where I used to take apple pie to the fundraising bazaars. It was a place I knew well, with old wooden benches and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. When Karen suggested that the meeting be there, I accepted without hesitation. I thought it was symbolic, a space that reminded me of who I was before I was treated as a nuisance. I dressed simply, a round neck blouse, black pants, flat shoes. I tied my hair with a pearl hairpin, put on some pink lipstick, and went. I arrived with my brown briefcase tight between my arms. Karen was already waiting for me. And shortly after, Brandon and Melanie entered. He, with that hurried air, shirt too pressed for the type of date he was. She, impeccable as always, with a beige dress that must have cost more than a month's rent at the shelter where I was staying. They greeted me with a hi, Mom, and an icy smile. I just nodded. We sat down, on the table, and they placed bread, salad, and roast chicken. No one touched the food right away. Brandon began by speaking. She said that things got out of control, that it was never meant to hurt, that they just wanted to make sure you had someone taking care of you. You spoke as if you had knocked a glass on the floor, not as if you had destroyed the life of the one who gave you everything. Melanie smiled. She looked at me as if she already knew the end of the story, as if I thought I was there to beg for forgiveness. And maybe, years ago, I would have done that, but not now. I took a deep breath, opened my briefcase calmly, and took out 3 papers. One by one, I put it on the table. Oh, a copy of the power of attorney, named one else, with the date and name of her lawyer, the bank statement with the deposits, and finally, a simple land was a palm, handwritten note. Well, least dear, the house was built with love. Oh, and now it is supported by lies. Brandon looked at the papers, looked at me and said, Mom, we just wanted the best for you. It was the only time my voice almost trembled. But he did not tremble. I replied, hide, looking into his eyes. The best thing for me would be to continue trusting the son I raised, and you took that from me. Melanie looked away. For the first time, her smile wavered. Well, Karen remained silent. No. Watching, I continued. I didn't come here to ask for anything. I didn't come to beg for a house. For excuses, for the return of goods. I came to show that I'm alive, that I understood everything, that every step was premeditated, that every sweet word was a disguise, and that the woman sitting here today is not the same one who signed that paper in 2022. That was a mother she trusted. How? Today, I am a woman who has learned. They said nothing more. Silence fell on the table like a heavy blanket. The food has cooled down. Brandon tried to take the papers, but Karen picked them up. These are copies for legal use, she said, firmly. And I am standing up slowly, added, that was the only chance they would look me in the eye. The next one will be in front of someone who will understand the weight of this betrayal. I left the room with my heart pounding, but not with anger. It was dignity. It was as if each step to the car was a brick coming back into place. For the first time, they saw me not as a burden, but as someone who has returned. And you know what surprised me the most? It wasn't their silence. That was Brandon's look when he read the note. For a second, no, he seemed to remember who I was. But it was only for a second. Then it hardened again. And that's when I knew what. This was not the end yet, because the next day, a message arrived on my cell phone, and it wasn't from any of them. It was from someone who knew more than he should, and that he was ready to tell. The morning after dinner, I'll chill out. I woke up before sunrise. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't listen to the radio. I didn't pray. I just sat at the table with a sheet of paper, the same handwriting as always, and wrote with the firmness of someone who no longer expects a return. folded along with a copy of the lawsuit prepared by Karen. I put my letter in a registered envelope and addressed it to Brandon. There was no greeting. There was no explanation. Just the phrase that came to me like a sentence from my chest. Don't look for me. Don't call me Mom. I went alone. Now, I'm just Gladys. And, along with that, the official revocation of the power of attorney, the last legal bond that still tied me to him. I went to the post office with the calm step of someone who no longer runs after anyone. I paid for the shipment with the bills counted, kept the receipt, and left. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. No. My fingers were steady as I folded each paper, because there is a type of pain that when it matures, it turns to stone, and stone does not tremble, does not bleed, does not scream. It just remains. On the way back, I passed in front of the school where my eldest granddaughter studied. I went downstairs, waited for the gate to open, and asked to leave a letter at the office. It was for her, just for her. He did not speak of inheritance, of quarrels, or of betrayal. He only said, if one day you want to know who I was, ask the weather. It counts better than people, because I knew that the story they would tell about me would not be fair. But time corrects even silence. I arrived at the shelter, and, for the first time in months, I went to bed without fear of the night. I blocked Brandon and Melanie from my networks, changed the cell phone number with the help of the lady at the reception, and asked not to receive any more unauthorized visitors. It was the end of me for them, but for me, it was the beginning of something that I didn't know the name of yet. That night, I opened the bedroom window and felt the October air coming through the crack. Light, mild, fresh, clean. I closed my eyes and thanked him, not for the loss, but for clarity, because sometimes we need to lose everything to see ourselves whole again. But, the next day, I received an unexpected call on an unknown number. Wouldn't hurt so much, on the other side of the state. I hesitated to answer, but something told me, take it. And I did. It was a low, masculine voice with a slight southern accent. He only said, Donna Gladys, I have something you might want to know. And no, it's not about Brandon. The voice on the other end of the line was that of a man named Michael. He said that he had worked with Brandon in a construction company a few years ago, but that they had drifted apart due to disagreements. I heard what happened, and I thought you deserved to know what he's saying out there. Me. I was silent. How? Just listening. Michael said that Brandon, in recent months, had been complaining about the injustice he was experiencing, saying that he had done everything for his mother's safety and that he was misunderstood. But the most curious thing was that, after the preliminary hearing of the lawsuit, he was fired from the company where he worked. It didn't take well. Michael said people learned about the accusation of exploitation against an elderly woman, and the boss decided to cut ties. The silence that Brandon thought would kill me. No, it was the same one that was now beginning to swallow him. No job, no old house, no clean credit. Oh, the new residence, where Melanie and he had so proudly settled, began to have leaks in the walls, seepage in the upstairs windows, moisture in the basement, and the repair was expensive. No, and the insurance did not cover everything. Melanie tried to sell some jewelry, but it didn't even make it for half the budget. The new car they had financed, a luxury pickup truck, was repossessed by the bank. Brandon showed up walking into the neighborhood pharmacy, his face downcast. An old neighbor told me. He didn't even look people in the eye. It was as if, no. At last, he began to understand the weight of what he did. Not because he regretted it, but because the world suddenly stopped opening doors. Melanie, Nintong, in turn, tried to contact her father, Maid, who lived in Georgia, asking for help. Leon Seo, Niban, alone, anything. The father refused, and her mother. This was the part that got me the most, would have said, "What starts wrong, ends wrong." Look, to this day I don't know if it was just a phrase or a direct message, but it was accurate, because the image she cultivated so much of an educated daughter-in-law, an ideal wife, and an Instagram mother has crumbled like wet paper. The penny dropped too late, and it's curious to see how, when the money runs out, the smiles disappear with it. The friends began to move away. The invitations to barbecues are gone, and the relatives who used to praise their care for me stopped sharing family photos. Melanie became bitter. Brandon, apathetic. And me? I was still standing. What do you, why? Without a house. But entirely. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if this story is touching you in any way, like this video and subscribe. And let's make this story reach those who need it, because there are a lot of people sitting there in silence, thinking they were the only ones to go through this. And it wasn't. I confess that I did not wish harm to anyone, but I saw that life takes care of itself. What they sowed, they reaped. What they hid came to light, and what they did to my name, now they carried theirs. But even so, even with all this, there was still one thing that worried me. Because deep down, there was one last wound, a void that neither the process, nor the papers, nor the silence had been able to fill. And this emptiness had a name, a small, sweet name, who one day called me Grandma with a mouthful of mashed potatoes. The name that Brandon and Melanie didn't imagine would still live inside me, quiet, but strong, because when I least expected it, life found a way to bring that voice back. And she wrote me a letter. I sat on the wooden bench of the Charleston County Courthouse, the light filtering through the large glass windows, creating patterns on the polished floor. Every strike of the judge's gavel seemed to echo inside me, reminding me of every moment that brought me there. My heart still tired from the emotional and physical battle, beat fast. But I remained motionless, watching Brandon and Melanie sit in front of me. The room was full of people, curious neighbors, some old friends, even court officials who had heard rumors about the story. But in that instant, all eyes turned to me, and I felt a strange mixture of fear and calm. It was as if, for the first time in many months, my place in the world was being publicly acknowledged. The judge, a man with a steady gaze and a slow voice, began reading the documents that my lawyer, Dr. Buckard, Karen Myers, Han, had attached to the lawsuit. I heard my name mentioned repeatedly, followed by details of my life that I would never have imagined would be formally presented in a court of law. Decades of service as a nurse, sleepless nights caring for patients in Mount Pleasant and Charleston, volunteering at the city's hospital, community mom awards in the 80s, bank statements showing generous donations to the church, and of course, whatever you would sounded program. Every dollar spent to support Brandon during his education and early adulthood. Each word seemed to beat inside me, blending with the memory of years of quiet effort, care, love, and trust placed in the one I loved most. Melanie, sitting with a rigid posture, one cities, what were we to know qual? Tried to intervene. His voice, now sweet but tense, broke the silence of the courtroom. Mr. Cone, I know no judge, Judge, I think there was a misunderstanding here. We never intended to harm Mrs. Gladys, but the judge raised a hand, stopping it firmly. Here, we don't just judge what has been done. We think who has been forgotten. The phrase fell in the room like a silent thunderclap, reverberating in the chants. In the eyes of everyone present, including Brandon's, a shiver ran through my body. The truth, finally, was spoken loudly, cold, and direct, but fairly. It was the validation of decades of dedication and a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful or close, had the right to erase his history. As he spoke, I felt the room narrow around me. Every detail of my life was recognized, not as a mere account, but as a proof of my human and moral worth. I saw Melanie look down, and Brandon bit his lip, as if every word of the judge pierced his soul. I realized there that, despite what they had done, still now, the truth had a force that neither money, nor manipulation, nor lies could suppress. My trajectory of love, work, and sacrifice was engraved not only in the papers, but in the collective consciousness of those who watched the hearing, and for the first time in months, I felt a wave of relief mixed with a strange, sweet satisfaction. In the middle of reading, a memory struck me almost physically. The first day Brandon walked into West Ashley Elementary School, holding my hand, confident and curious. As I encouraged him to take the first step on his own, I remembered the cold nights helping him with schoolwork, The effort to pay for each registration, each book, each tutoring. I remembered the tears I silently shed as I watched my son start his own family, believing that my dedication would be recognized. And then I realized that all that recent pain, the betrayal, the loss of the house, Brandon's silence, didn't erase all of that. On the contrary, it strengthened my awareness of what was really important. And it is at this moment that I want you to imagine with me. When the truth emerges, even if late, it has a power capable of changing looks, attitudes, and hearts. If you've ever been through something that seemed unfair, but then the truth came out, you know what a relief it is to feel your worth recognized. Share in the comments if you've ever felt something like this. Just one word. Yes, I felt it. Nah, it touched me. It helps me understand how many of us have experienced this feeling. The judge paused for a moment, allowing the room to absorb every detail of the story being told. Brandon looked at me, his eyes big, full of confusion and shame. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. The strength was not only in me, but in the inevitability of justice that was beginning to manifest itself. Melanie, what did you go Tom? Meanwhile, began biting her lower lip, clearly struggling to maintain her composure in the face of the weight of her own actions. Every detail of the scheme, the manipulated power of attorney, the transfer of the house, the irregular deposits, was now exposed in public, and there was no hiding the magnitude of its moral failure. And I, as tired as I was, felt that I was finally getting a piece of myself back, a piece that no one could take away again. A phrase of the judge resonated strongly within me, and it still makes me shiver every time I remember it. Whoever ignores the humanity of another, sooner or later, will find his own flaws exposed. It was as if Melanie and Brandon's every act had been recorded, not just in the courtroom papers, but in a kind of universal moral memory, a reminder that what is done coldly, calculatedly, and unjustly will always be seen in the light of truth. I felt my shoulders relax, but not completely. There was still much to be solved. Nadia, one went out high, much to be restored. But the first fundamental piece of the puzzle had been put in the right place. As the hearing continued, my attention turned again to Brandon. He didn't speak, but his eyes reflected an internal struggle visible to anyone who wanted to observe. I remembered when I was just a boy, proud to learn to ride a bike without training wheels, running around the backyard of our old house. I never thought that, years later, he would be the same one who now faced the weight of truth so directly. And yet, at that moment, I realized something profound. The truth, even if hard, could be transformative. Perhaps Brandon would finally understand that it's not just about property or money, but about respect, memory, and integrity. I couldn't help but smile slightly as I saw Melanie finally wither in her chair. The arrogance that once filled the room was gone. Her aura of invulnerability, built up by months of manipulation and coldness, began to crumble in the face of the clarity of the evidence. And even though I felt every physical and emotional pain of the past month, realized that it wasn't just moral revenge. It was the restoration of justice. And the first time in a long time that the sense of peace had crept into my heart. A silent but overwhelming justice that needed no shouting or confrontation, just the truth being told in a cold but correct name. And it is curious how life brings moments like this, in which every detail, every tear past, and every sleepless night seems to converge into a single point of recognition. I looked at the room, at the neighbors, at the court staff, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging, not by control, not by fear or authority, but by the validation of a life lived with love, dedication, and dignity. Wadiwad song. And deep in my chest, a silent and powerful feeling. The truth has a weight that not all the falsehood in the world can overcome. But even with all this happening, something in the air told me that the story was not yet complete, because justice, no matter how clear it may be, does not always reveal all the pieces on the board. And there were still questions about Brandon, about Melanie, about the next steps in the process that needed to be addressed. I knew that the most memorable moment was yet to come, and that I would need to be alert, firm, and attentive. Yes, the truth had already made its entrance, but the full effect would only be realized when each piece of the game was put in its proper place. And so I sat down, took a deep breath, and prepared my heart for the next move, aware that while I had regained my voice and my story, the full outcome was yet to be revealed. And the question that remained, firm and unsettling, echoed in my mind. How far would the truth transform those who tried to erase me? And what profound lessons still awaited to be learned before the watchful eyes of all who witnessed what it truly means to be remembered, respected, and never forgotten? I sat down again in the courtroom to hear the final verdict. This time, there was no tension tightening in my chest like before, just a sense of quiet determination. Brandon and Melanie stood ahead, their faces tense and eyes restless, trying to decipher what awaited them. The judge began to read the sentence calmly. Each word weighing down the room as if it were made of lead. Slowly, but inexorably, Brandon was ordered to pay symbolic compensation, small compared to what he had lost, but still enough to officially mark his responsibility. In addition, he would have to perform hours of community service, jobs that would force him to face realities that he previously ignored. Helping in shelters, helping the elderly, participating in volunteer programs that showed the value of empathy. I felt no joy at the punishment. I felt only a strange sense of closure, of silent justice finally occurring. Melanie, in turn, lost temporary custody of the children, and the judge highlighted his emotional instability, manipulative behavior, and the way he sought personal benefits to the detriment of the stability of his own family. For them, the impact was profound but silent. There was no applause. There were no shouts of victory, just the firm realization that the world sometimes found discreet ways to balance the scales. As I listened to all of this, I felt a pang of relief mixed with an unexpected serenity. The house, now foreclosed, due to the debts accumulated by Brandon and Melanie, was sold. None. How? I, as always, did not want to recover it. Every brick, every curtain, every memory was marked by a chapter that belonged to the past, and I had already found my freedom in another way. I had decided to donate the proceeds to a local nursing home in Mount Pleasant, the same kind of place that had taken me in temporarily when all seemed lost. I wanted those resources to be transformed into comfort, human warmth, veracity, attention and dignity for people who, like me, had given aught and received little. It was the way I found to close that cycle with generosity, without rancor, just with recognition of life and what really matters. In the local press, a discreet note went almost unnoticed. Charleston recognizes silent heroine in case of family exploitation. I read that sentence with a mixture of humility and emotion. It was not for fame, but for the deep sense of moral justice that finally echoed publicly. As he walked out of the courtroom, Brandon sat alone in a cheap cafe, watching the rain fall out the window, his cell phone in hand. The drops drew traces on the window pane, as if each one were a silent count of their mistakes. He read the same note that I had read, that discreet reference to the recognition of my worth, and for the first time, I realized he felt the weight of what he had done. There were no confrontations, no arguments, just the realization that life goes on, and that certain choices have inevitable consequences. Melanie tried to contact family and friends, but each call received evasive responses. The house they thought they owned as an extension of their control now existed only as a memory and bitter learning. It was a soundless defeat, a silent lesson that needed no audience, only anyone willing to understand. And I, even feeling the weight of everything I had been through, managed to smile slightly, aware that my dignity remained intact, firm and unshakable, as it always should have been. The world suddenly seemed clearer. Every step I took outside the courthouse, every corner of Charleston, every square, and every old building in the West Ashley neighborhood carried a new meaning. No longer painful memories, but memories that now had a different texture. Recognition of one's own strength, the courage to continue, the ability to transform pain into positive action. At the same time, I felt a silent alert inside me. The story did not end there, because, although justice had played its part, there was still life to rebuild, broken ties to be processed internally, and the deep understanding that the path ahead would require new steps of care, attention, and courage. Brandon and Melanie's defeat was clear, but my real victory lay in remaining whole, intact, emotionally restored, ready to face each new morning with awareness and dignity. And then, as I looked again at the rain that was falling on the city, I realized that life had a silent way of teaching. No fanfare, no noise, just showing that wrong choices find their inevitable outcomes, and that the strength of those who have been betrayed can be more powerful than any blow received. I felt light, but also vigilant, knowing that the story still had chapters to reveal. Small and meaningful stories of how people can react, learn, and grow in the face of adversity. The question that remained in my heart, and which seemed to echo in the cadence of the rain, why I was of what was, to what extent can the transformation of those who hurt us really happen? And what paths of silent reparation can life still reserve? I moved into a small studio in the French Quarter, a modest space with white walls, a worn wood floor, and a balcony that allowed me to look out over the Cooper River at dusk. Each day was a rediscovery, a small celebration of the freedom I finally felt. There was no expensive furniture, master cell, no embroidered curtains like in the old house, but there was fresh air, sun streaming in through the windows, and a feeling that every choice now belonged to me. I started going to the local library, where I enrolled in pottery classes, feeling the clay between my fingers, molding shapes without haste, without demand, brought a calm that I didn't even remember was possible. I learned to let my hands speak, and that each piece, imperfect or not, was a testimony of patience and reconstruction. In addition, I returned to help at St. John's, no longer as someone who needed to please or justify himself, but simply out of love. I prepared small snacks for community gatherings, organized donations, and talked to neighbors who called me Miss Gladys with genuine affection, without judgment, without ulterior motives. He was also visiting the nursing home he had supported with the amount of compensation. It was a singular feeling to enter that place and feel that my presence, silent and discreet, made a difference. The stories of the women who lived there were my new memoir, and I listened, learned, shared laughter and tears. He didn't talk about what he had lost. He just listened. And as he listened, he felt that each human experience carried an invisible force, a lesson about resilience, compassion, and dignity. It was in this silence, in this reconstructed daily life, that I realized something fundamental. Home is not a house. It is not walls or furniture. It is not the decoration or the memory of past laughter. Home is a state of mind, an inner shelter that is built with conscious choices, with the courage to leave behind those who hurt us, and with the ability to reinvent ourselves. As I looked down at the Cooper River as the sun set, I felt my whole life before me, no longer as a past marked by betrayals, but as a present that I'd touch, shape, and fill with meanings I had chosen to create. And as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky reflect colors that resembled watercolor brushstrokes, I felt a peace that the old house could never offer me. Here, every breath, every gesture, every moment of silence was mine. Time had become my home, and I finally inhabited my own life without fear. without demand, oh, without pain that defined me. But even with this freedom, a silent question persisted, swirling inside me like the current of the river. How to rebuild ties with the world that still holds memories of who we were, and how to allow the stories of pain to serve as a bridge to teach others to protect their own hearts. I was a mother. I was a nurse. I kept and mom. I went down on house, and for a while I was invisible. But time is kind to those who wait without shouting. Why, wow. Today, sitting on the balcony of my French Quarter studio, with the Cooper River reflecting the colors of the sunset, I feel a peace I never thought possible. Brandon and Melanie go on with their lives, now carrying the awareness of choices they cannot undo. The old house was sold. Now, justice served in silent and profound ways. And me? I learned that it is not the place that defines us, but the dignity with which we occupy each moment. I don't want revenge, just recognition of the value that I have always carried and that time has not erased. The lesson that remains is simple and powerful. The love we give, the respect we maintain for ourselves, and the courage to rebuild our history are the true foundations of life. Even when all seems lost, resilience reconnects us with our own essence, and forgiveness, when it arises, is not for others, but so that we can walk light. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having accompanied me here. Your company warms this old soul and reminds me that each shared story creates invisible bridges between us. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. It's like a hug that warms and supports this little corner that we built together. Subscribe to the channel. What did you think of it? An invitation to come back to the next cafe, to hear and feel new stories. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching. I love imagining each place where these memories arrive. Don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again, and we can continue together. And before you say goodbye, don't go yet. Soon, listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Wow. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story, and allow each chapter of life to continue to teach, inspire, and transform us. Today, I was a mother, a nurse, a floor, and tomorrow I will still be the memory that chose to remain free.